John Hamilton, July 1st, 1961. Lived in Spencer County since 1969. I was born in Virginia in July of 61. My father was in the Navy, and we lived on various naval bases prior to that time. My mom grew up in Shelby County, and her mother was a Greer, and a lot of the Greers settled in Nelson County and Anderson County, and my grandfather on her side was settled in Anderson County. And my father is from Eastern Kentucky, Salyersville, the county seat of McGoffin County in far eastern Kentucky. We are in the little township of Wakefield, Kentucky. It's halfway between Taylorsville, the county seat of Spencer County, Kentucky, and Bloomfield on Kentucky 55. I purchased this in the fall of 2022 from a longtime neighbor. I grew up here in Wakefield, attended Spencer County schools, and knew the family that owned this. They took possession of it after the railroad stopped operations in the early 1950s, and they continued to operate a general store here. It had been in operation as a store since 1846, and then it ceased operations in 1980 as that state. Also, during that time, there was a U.S. post office here from the mid-1880s up to the mid-1940s, and the train started through here in 1880 and ran through 1952. So the building has serviced a number of different businesses and provided resources for people around here to be able to have access to a number of things. Well, people will tell you, growing up with me, I've been a preservationist and a historian, and this was a golden opportunity to be able to purchase this as it adjoins my other properties here. And with the Kentucky history and American history associated with this end of Spencer County, this was a wonderful piece of property to acquire and be able to bring forward to what I intend to have it when it's completed. We've had a number of setbacks or whatever due to my resources for personnel to help me, but I've gotten it to this point right now, and we're going to be progressing forward with it very quickly. Well, it's part of our collective history here, and as President Lincoln, a lot of people like to recite Lincoln, he stated one time that if you don't remember your history, you're destined to repeat it. In this case, this would be a good history to repeat. We've had the William Quantrill of Quantrill's Raiders, a notorious group of guerrilla soldiers or whatever in the U.S. Civil War, encamped around here. They were welcomed in the area here. William Quantrill was mortally wounded at the back of the property. Frank James, Cole Younger, Jesse James, all of them, all those guys have been through here. It was even a camp over for the U.S. Army Union Corps, the First Corps for the Battle of Perryville. When they marched out of Louisville to come here, they encamped in this area here. So I found a number of artifacts through the years for them. The building next door to this was a blacksmith shop, and the blacksmith man, his last name was Jacobs. He was a colored man. He was the one that told the Union forces that Quantrill was up at the back of the property, so that's significant with this. Another individual that grew up here in Spencer County, Bill Carlisle, one of the first inductees into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He was born in Wakefield in 1908, and I have requested a roadside marker for him. And that's just a couple of the attributes for this building and area right here for tourism. I'll tell you a little bit about the station and the railroad line that was placed through here now. The Cumberland and Ohio Railroad got the approval to build the line from Madison, Indiana, all the way to Nashville, Tennessee. They were able to complete the Shelbyville Bloomfield branch completely, and then they were able to grade some of the land from Shelbyville north to Eminence, and south of here at Greensburg, they were able to complete that before L&N took the line over. The L&N's line ran parallel to this along Interstate 65 to Nashville, so you can see their financial interest in eliminating a competitor in the area. But while this was in operation, regardless of who owned it and working it, materials were transported from Shelbyville all the way to Bloomfield, from hardware of like brick, wood, building, any type of building materials for the stores, coal. Also, this station was one of them where they could bring farmers here to earn some additional income. They could bring a creamery can that was issued to them by Tri-State Butter Company in Cincinnati, Ohio. It had a serial number, the farmer, his farm name, and the depot name on it. They would bring it here, and it would be loaded onto the train and taken to that location in northern Kentucky, emptied, sterilized, and returned back with some money. So it was a supplemental way for them to earn some money on the farms. And then the whole area around here was primarily a farming community at that time. This was a centralized location in southern Spencer County. It had a, like I said, it had a post office here. And at that time, when it started, there was no rural carriers for post office. So people would come here and get their mail and could get groceries and meet some of their neighbors from time to time, in addition to the time they would spend with them at the churches around here. I'm in the southwest corner of the structure. This building was built in 1846 in two parts, and I'm in the second part of it. To my right is the entrance into this section here, and this happened to be at the time the colored waiting room and entrance into the facility. All right, I just mentioned where I was standing. I'm still standing in the same area, but what I wanted to show you now was some of the rooms. You can see some of the framework that was added through the decades by the station masters of the station. This building was originally built with the four walls supporting the entire roof structure. It's a Amish style structure with no post or whatever to be anywhere in for support. It does have a couple of chimneys, which I intend to remove just for safety reasons. But what my intention is, when I'm finished with this, the entire structure, when you walk into the room, it will just be one huge area. And I will be able to have, I'll have some display cases that I've purchased or whatever along the walls to showcase a lot of the artifacts that I found while restoring this, as well as seasonal artifacts, such like at the time of the Kentucky Derby, tourists will be able to come through here and see some of the, for example, my mother attended the Oaks and Derbies from the late 40s to the mid 1980s, and she passed away last year, and one of the rooms in her house was full of hat boxes of hats that she'd worn for those things. So that's one thing in my mind or whatever that I'll display at Derby time, as well as quilts that she hand stitched. She made over 200 of those in her lifetime, and those will be nice things to show in here for the tourists as they come through. There's something that the Kentucky women could do to show that, you know, in rural areas they could do a lot of things. They had to, because they didn't have access to a lot of other things, so they learned. All right, I'd like to show you some of the equipment used in the station here to support the railroad industry, as well as the post office and the general store, primarily the safe that was used. This is a still functioning safe. It has the patent date on it and the number of enhancements to the patents or whatever through the years. So this was at the turn of the last century. It came from a safe company in Cincinnati, Ohio. It has a lock area here and some pull drawers here. So there's no telling how much money moved through this over the period of time it was used. On top here, I have a number of the light fixtures. Lighting was made available here in the early, late 19-teens and 20s. They started affixing these structures or whatever with lighting, and these are a few of the porcelain globe attachments or whatever that hung from the ceiling. I have one still hanging back there for demo purposes, but these are just a few of the fixtures. And you can go online, needless to say, and find some of these. I'm not sure what I'm going to go back with for lighting in here. I have a couple of ideas, but that's going to be one of the things towards the end. Okay. Stepping over here, I'll try to bring this to the front without disconnecting my sound. This is a commodities cart that they could use to roll luggage. They could roll various things coming off the train or to the train on. Okay. And then over here behind me is a set of scales. And these are the weights. Correspond, this one's 30 pounds or whatever. And they would affix these onto here. And you would be able to move your scale across to see what the weight of something is. This is one of the companies that made those from Buffalo. There was a Buffalo scale company out of Buffalo, New York. The very prominent one for the railroad industry in this country. Okay. I would like to show you some of the things that were found during this restoration process to date, as we've worked inside here as well as outside in the immediate ground area. This is an oil dispenser. On the northern side of the station, there's an outbuilding attached to it. That's where the oil dispensers and things of that nature were held. You could walk right out of this building into that little room, and then there was a door going to the left to the track bed. So they could use one of these dispensers. You can see, you know, the engine as it's coming across is going to be hot. So you wanted to have something to be able to have some distance from it for when you're trying to pour into different ports into the thing so you won't burn yourself. So that's the reason for the length of this. This is one of the many styles of lanterns used by the conductors on the train. This one has the L&N logo on the glass as well as on the top. There were a number of manufacturers in the country that made these. This one was called the Armitage and out of New York. And it's a kerosene heating system. So you put that in here and light it and go on. There's a key on the side of this thing that will let you light it. Here are a couple of the tools found underneath the station here, just laying on the earth. There's a hammer here. It has L&N's logo on it. How it got there, I have no idea. And this was one of the wrenches, and it has L&N's logo on it as well. Locks are the item that I have a lot of found through here, especially working on the track bed to the west of the station here. I have the keys for each one of these. I may not have a key for everyone, but I have a key for the slot, and there are different slots or whatever for each one of these. So I'm able to open and close each one of them. Some of them are older than others. This one would have been from the 1800s. coming into the 1930s and further. Okay. Well, this is a neat little artifact here, in that this is used by an engineer once seated in the locomotive to insert into a slot and rotate it, and it serves as a handle for moving the train forward and reverse. So they had these in locomotives, steam powered, as well as up through the diesel versions of the trains. This is one of the, I have 3 of these that were found in here. This is a brass lock with the L&N's logo on it, and I have the keys for it. And I intend to place this on a door as a part of an exhibit when I open the station as for history. Here are a few of the silver plated pieces found under the floor here. I can only assume that they were removing them off the train thinking they could come get them later, but they never did. And each one of them has the L&N imprint on them, and they were all made by International Silver Company. And it denotes on there that it's like for L&N and how many ounces of silver were used for each item. This is a couple of the spoon, a couple of the utensils, the L&N logos on there, and then the International Silver Company is labeled on there. So I polished these pieces, but I have a lot more that I'm not going to polish, and I will have all these on display. This is a 6-inch plate cover. I don't know what they brought out onto the table, whatever, for 6. That wouldn't be a big enough one for me for my plate, but maybe a dessert or something that they would cover this one with. Here's a collection of date nails. I'll set these off here. I didn't know anything about date nails. Okay, now the purpose of these, each one of them has a number on the top. That corresponds to the last 2 digits of a year. And what they would use these for, when they went out into the field and maybe they changed a railroad tie out or some other wooden piece or something, that they would drive one of these nails in, and so the next time they went out, they would know when the last time that piece was worked on. So I thought that was a pretty ingenious idea. They also use these for another reason with the ties. They would soak the ties in a compound to see how long that they could last, and they would drive these in of the year that they put them in like a test bed to be able to see which is the best coating or mixture or whatever for the ties that they're going to put out in the field. So that was a pretty ingenious idea. Now I have a collection of timetables. Now I won't open these up because of my hands here, but when I do handle them, I use those white archival gloves, and these will be available for individuals that would come through here and are doing some research or whatever. These list, the earliest one I have is from the turn of the last century. This is March 1st, 1909. And each one of these lists this station in it as a stop, which is really cool. One thing that I am using these for is within the station, I intend to have an operational version of a model railroad layout in here, and the layout is representative of the 27-mile track bed from Shelbyville to Bloomfield, with tailors with the towns or whatever 3D printed and painted, and the computers will control the speed of the locomotives based upon the time stamps of when they're supposed to stop, how many minutes or whatever from wherever, from Taylorsville to Wakefield when they were supposed to stop and things of that nature. There will be 3 different types of locomotives and car sets on there to basically span the period of time from fall of January of 1882 through October 1952. They first started with steam locomotives, so we will have one of those on there, and then a different change out in around 1910 to 20, and then later at the end they were using more of the diesel locomotives. So there will be 3 on there working from Shelbyville to Bloomfield and back. And all of the structures that were used from the Salt River Bridge, the Taylorsville Station, the Bashir's Bridge, the trestles coming out here and the tunnel and all that are being replicated. So it will be a history in motion. I've asked a number of individuals that are 10 to 15 years older than myself that as a child they could remember the train still running here. That was the beginning of their life. You know, they were between 1 and 10 at the time or whatever that the thing was ending, but they can recollect stories that for their own self, as well as stories that were told to them by their parents and grandparents. I've given them digital recorders at their leisure to record those memories, and those memories will be incorporated into this layout as individuals, tourists come through and walk through. Those stories will be available to say, well, this event happened here in 1942 or 1895, whatever. So, and there are a lot of neat stories. There's one in particular and I'm not limiting it just to Spencer County, but there's one unique one for Finchville, for example, where the train was coming through there and it was running late, and there was a young lady on board that was getting off there in Finchville, but there wasn't anyone to greet her. And so the station, so the locomotive, they stopped the train, and they weren't about to leave this woman out there, and this is like 1922. They weren't about to leave her there by herself. So they started just blaring on the horn or whatever to try to get attention to somebody around there. And eventually someone came and took her and got her away. So that's one of the family history stories on this. So, and there are others where they would stop the train and hunt. You know, this really wasn't the train was carrying commodities, but it would run from Shelbyville to Bloomfield and stop. So the engineers, I mean, if they saw something or whatever, a fishing place or whatever, they could pull off, because a lot of times they weren't even pulling a passenger car, so it was just freight. So they would stop the train. It really didn't make that much difference to them on time level. So those are some of the stories that will be incorporated into that presentation. Right now, and on the far end is Kentucky 55. You're looking at the northbound lanes of it. If you see the four-board fencing off in the distance, starting just to the left of the red fire hydrant, the first post that you see there was the center line of the main track through here. It ran almost 400 feet back to the south here, and then continued on to Bloomfield, Kentucky. Wakefield was one of the stations on this branch line of the railroad that had a stock pens. Taylorsville had one, and Normandy Station had one. The stock pen was over here to the right once you crossed the highway. So there were two sections of the train. You had the main line and then the spur, and then it would join back up off in the distance. We uncovered a number of the locks, which I've shown you. You can look at the grade of this track bed. Now, remember, they built this in the late 1870s, so this was done with pickaxes, grubbing hose, shovels. This was manual labor. And the engines at the time could only support a 2 to a 3% grade. So they had to be consistent going down through here of leveling things. And you can see how higher it gets down there in order to bring it level, versus as we come up through here, you can see how less of a drop off there is. Okay. Now here is the back of the station area here. It currently has vinyl siding on it, which will be removed. You can see some of the original woodwork on there. It will be restored to that. And these windows, some of them were added on later, and some of them weren't there on the original structure, but the framing is on the inside. We are restoring back to the original structure the best that we can. We're walking north here, and I wanted to show you off over here to the left. This will be a bed and breakfast for in the Wakefield area when I'm done. It has currently been gutted like what I'm doing here for the station, and the teams of carpenters, electricians, and other professionals will come in at the end to be able to complete both of them, and both of them will open to the public. Okay. Around the farm, I have, a number of piles of rocks. These rocks will be used to build some fences, some columns, as well as some areas around burn pits for people to come out here and enjoy the weather. Up here to the left, show you this one fence post right here. We're currently walking up just imagine we're walking up the track bed. In 1908, Frank James and Cole Younger of the James Gang exited the train. They were coming back to go to the Quantrill battlefield, which is just at the back of the property here, behind that fence line. And I have a photograph of them posing in front of that, where I've set the post, with the house that was there over Frank James's shoulder. So it's going to be I'm going to have a little exhibit right there for people when they pull off. We'll have a number of signs out here with some history, and they'll be able to safely pull off and read about these. This is the sign that we put up in January, and a number of people have stopped out here, have had their photos made with the sign. And at the top of it, I had this set where the photographer took the photo that's at the top of the sign showing the station. And I have all of the signage that's on the building and I intend on replicating it and having that all on there, because I don't want to put the originals out here. Okay, but we will have that. This, I mentioned earlier about the oil dispenser in the oil room. That's what this was. So you could come into it from inside the facility, and then you can exit from a door right here. This is the engineer for the train right here, and you can see where it was setting in its time. Okay. So I thank you for visiting the station today, and we will have more for maybe another story about some more of Wakefield's history in the future.